This isn't just a Gen Z issue. This is a generational signal flare. If you're young and feel unheard, this video is for you. If you are older and work with, teach, or hire young people, this is for you also. Because something is breaking, and most people are whispering about it, if they say anything at all. It is not about politics or phones, or kids these days. It's about the quiet collapse of confidence. It's about a generation that is losing its own voice. And here's what it means for us all. Let's take a look at the symptoms. Ask any teacher, manager, recruiter, or even a parent. Gen Z are struggling with eye contact. They avoid phone calls. They are short and give clipped answers. There is a constant need for scripts, templates, emojis to express emotions. They have anxiety before Zoom calls, even anxiety before simple voice notes. Now that might just sound like being simple introverts or shyness, but this is something else. It's a chronic verbal hesitation. It's a loss of fluency in one's own voice. It's the subtle but severe atrophy of real-time human communication. And here's where it gets interesting. According to a 2022 study from YouGov, 68% of Gen Z respondents said they felt some level of anxiety when making a phone call. More than 1 in 3 say they avoid voice communication altogether, at work, in school, even socially. A 2023 study published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology reported that frequent digital communication has a positive correlation with real-life social discomfort and verbal avoidance, especially in adolescents and young adults. But this isn't just about phones. This is about a world that made real-time speech feel dangerous. To understand this epidemic, we need to go inside the mind. We need to talk about perfectionism, shame, and overstimulation. The performance trap. Gen Z has grown up watching themselves more than being themselves. Front-facing cameras, voice filters, TikToks cut to the good part content. They rehearse their identities, polish their language, filter every phrase for tone and virality. So what happens when you throw that person into an unscripted job interview? They freeze. Because performance logic doesn't work in real conversations. Speech, unlike a TikTok caption, can't be backspaced. 2. The trauma of correction. Think back to school. Most students weren't trained to speak freely. They were trained to avoid being wrong. And studies confirm this. In 2019, a longitudinal study from the British Journal of Educational Psychology found that children who were publicly corrected in classrooms were more likely to associate speaking up with emotional risk and embarrassment well into early adulthood. This effect was stronger in girls, who were also more likely to equate verbal mistakes with moral failure. When you grow up being punished for speaking imperfectly, eventually you'll stop speaking at all. 3. The sleep anxiety feedback loop. Now let's connect the body. A 2023 study by the University of Helsinki found that 72% of Gen Z respondents sleep fewer than 7 hours per night. And here's why that matters. Sleep deprivation increases amygdala activation by up to 60%, according to UC Berkeley Center for Human Sleep Science. That means more emotional reactivity, more fear, and more social anxiety. Another study published in the Sleep Medicine Reviews showed that poor sleep quality was directly correlated to social avoidant behavior, especially among adolescents with high screen time. So what does this mean in practice? It means a 22-year-old who spends 4 hours a night scrolling, sleeps 5 hours, and then attends a job interview at 9 a.m. is already in a biologically anxious state before they've even said a word. Now let's look at the system. We call it education, but what we really built was a compliance simulator. Think about it. There's 30 kids in a room. One speaks at a time. Most of the day is spent listening and not expressing. Questions are discouraged. Being wrong is punished. And creativity only within the rubric. Communication becomes a test, not a skill, not a tool, a test. And what does that do to a young mind? It teaches them to equate speaking with risk and silence with safety. By the time they reach university or work, most aren't uneducated, they're unpracticed. They've never had real reps, just rehearsals. Now, a critical myth we need to destroy. Posting on social media is not the same as speaking. It's curated, controlled, edited, and filtered. It's communication without confrontation. But real speech requires courage. It's messy, unfiltered, and vulnerable. And most young people have never practiced that. They know how to tell stories, but not how to debate. They know how to caption, but not how to challenge. They know how to perform, but not how to speak from presence. In a world obsessed with noise, speaking with clarity is now a radical act. Real speech, the kind that changes rooms, hearts, decisions, has always been rare, but now it's borderline extinct. We don't reward clarity, we reward echo chambers, hot takes, groupthink, and speed over substance. But speaking clearly, it takes time and courage. It means owning a thought before you know how it will land. It means saying something real, even if it makes people uncomfortable. And for Gen Z, whose entire lives have been public, curated, and surveilled, that must be terrifying. But that's why it's so powerful. So what can we do? Whether you're Gen Z or Gen X trying to help them, here's what works. Create repetition without risk. Encourage voice journaling, reading out loud, recording yourself daily. You don't need a stage, just repetition. Normalize mistakes. Celebrate bad takes, encourage interruption. Tell your team or students, you don't need to be right, just be real. Prioritize sleep. I know it sounds unrelated, but it's not. 7 to 9 hours of consistent sleep literally rewires your emotional bandwidth. You can't speak boldly if your brain is starved. Replace scripts with curiosity. Train the question muscle. Instead of scripting replies, ask more questions in real time. It builds presence. Practice real presence. Turn off the front camera, put down the phone, and speak to someone without distraction. 5 minutes a day, every day, it changes everything. This isn't about fixing a generation, it's about rebuilding a foundation. Because communication isn't a soft skill, it's a survival skill. You can't lead without it, you can't love without it, you can't change anything until you say something. So if you're young and feel voiceless, start with a breath. Start with one sentence. Start with your story. And if you're older, help them speak. Don't just give feedback, give them the floor. The world isn't suffering too much from too much noise. It's suffering from too little clarity. So speak up, not to go viral, but to go real. Because in the silence, there's power waiting to be spoken.